Hi, my name is Cody Phillips. Today we'll be going over one of the most infamous cases in engineering ethics, the Ford Pinto scandal. We'll be covering what happened, the ethical failures that caused it, and what engineers today can learn from this tragic case. The first thing we'll be going over is the historic timeline. The late 1960s, Ford was under pressure from Japanese and European automakers who were dominating the subcompact car market. To compete, Ford President Lee Iacocca gave a clear mandate. The Ford Pinto must weigh under 2,000 pounds and must cost under $2,000. This became a company-wide mandate. To compete with this aggressive goal, the Ford Pinto was pushed from concept to production in a 25-month period, skipping many of the design processes and safety checks that occur in a typical 43-month production cycle. Crash tests during development revealed a critical flaw. The fuel tank was positioned just behind the rear axle with no structural protection. In rear-end collisions, even at relatively low speed, the tank could rupture and cause fires or explosions. Engineers identified cheap and effective fixes, a $1 rubber bladder or an $11 shield that would prevent most of these fires from occurring. However, Ford decided not to implement either of them. Instead, they conducted a cost-benefit analysis. The internal document, later leaked to the public, valued a human life at $200,000. Based on projected accidents, Ford concluded it would be cheaper to pay for death or injuries than to recall or redesign the Ford Pinto. By the late 1970s, over 2.2 million Pintos were on the American roads. Ford lists the amount killed by fires caused by the Ford Pinto as 27, but other entities may see the number go up as high as 500. Ford faced lawsuits, public backlash, and eventually a federal investigation. In 1978, 7 years after engineers first raised concerns, Ford finally issued a recall. Now we'll go over what you couldn't see on camera: the internal values and the psychological forces at play during the scandal. At the top of the chain was Ford President Lee Iacocca. He was known for his charisma and hard-driving leadership style. He prioritized profits, market shares, and production schedules above all else. He reportedly told his engineers, "Safety doesn't sell." That attitude became embedded within the company culture. The cost-benefit analysis Ford used wasn't illegal, but it was highly unethical. It quantified human lives as liabilities and justified knowingly releasing a dangerous product to the public. This is a classic example of utilitarian thinking gone wrong, sacrificing an individual's safety for the greater good of corporate profits. Inside the company, there is also a strong culture of obedience and silence. Engineers and middle managers who raised concerns were either ignored or discouraged. The pace of development left little room for debate, and few were willing to challenge Iacocca's visions. The situation fostered groupthink, a psychological phenomenon where the desire for harmony prevents people from speaking up, even when they know something's wrong. Another dynamic at play was the diffusion of responsibility. No single individual felt fully accountable. The decision to not fix the gas tank was the result of many small, routine approvals, each by people who felt they were just doing their job. In the end, Ford created a product that put thousands of lives at stake, but because of a systematic failure of values and courage. Now we'll focus on what engineers can learn from the Pinto scandal. First, ethical courage needs to be ingrained into engineering culture. Ford could have implemented a safety override system, a process that requires any known risk to be evaluated by a neutral safety committee, independent of marketing and cost pressures. Second, companies need more than just policies. They need people trained to recognize when numbers are being used to justify harm. When ethical concerns are raised, there needs to be real power behind them, like mandatory reporting channels or whistleblowing safeties for those that speak up. Finally, engineers should never assume that someone else is going to make the hard moral call. When responsibilities are spread out, you have to act as though you're the last line of defense, because sometimes, even if you may not know it at the time, you are. Thank you for listening. The Ford Pinto scandal reminds us that engineering is not just about solving problems. It's about making real decisions that could cost lives. And sometimes, the most important work an engineer could do is speak up and say, "This isn't safe and we can do better."